Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Finding Me in the ITV networks. On the 12th of March 2013, members of the WITS student community disrupted a musical recital by an Israeli pianist during the Israeli Apartheid Week. Following the protest, 11 students were charged and have subsequently been expelled. I would like to play a short clip which will introduce this particular context to the audience, and when we come back I will introduce my guests who will then explain about the protest and take the discussion further. So first I would like you to watch this so that you're familiar with the content in which we are going to elaborate on.
Our visitors must know we are students of vets in good standing. Yeah. We pay a lot of money to be here. Yeah. In fact, there is a struggle about that as well. They must understand that in this university, Zionism will not enjoy anymore. They will not bring anything related, sponsored, collaborating with Israel, and they expect it will be romantically accepted. We will challenge them on the picket lines. We will challenge them in parliament. We will challenge them in the boardrooms. We are even coming to their kitchens, where they hide their Zionist cheese, their Zionist spaghetti. We are going to ban all those products from this free land. For this is the land of the free. Solomon Mahlangu fell for this freedom, that you can come and make a mockery of it. Huh?
To discuss the expulsion of the WITS 11, I have with me today in the studio two of the students who are very much a part of the activist community on the WITS campus. With me is Tasneem Isop. She is a master's student in political sciences at the University of the Witwatersrand, and Uyanda Mumbete. Uyanda is also a BCom student, a student activist, and was part of the Student Representative Council in 2011-2012, which was responsible for taking the boycott resolution on Israel. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for joining me and for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Of course, we just showed the video now of the student protest, and I think we're going to start with the latest developments first, which is the expulsion, and then we will work chronologically backwards. But Tasneem, I'd like to start with you first. Considering the protest, the expulsion, can you perhaps inform us as to what led up to this, to these events? Who was responsible for charging the students and subsequently expelling them?
Well, it goes obviously nearly a year back now to the night of the protest. It's important to note that before the protest, we had tried to approach the university about cancelling the concert, which was in violation of the boycott resolution. We protested, and after the protest, the university management charged 11 of us under 6 counts of misconduct. Charges like stomping your feet, blowing a vuvuzela, singing and chanting were part of the counts that we were charged with. So the hearing then went on from about May of 2013 until very recently, 2 or 3 weeks ago, when we got our final sentencing. We were found guilty of one of the 6 counts against us, which was disruption of a university event. And for that, we were given a 1-year exclusion, suspended over 2 years, as well as 80 hours of community service.
Okay, so Uyanda, I mean, that's rather drastic for a charge like that. I mean, does the expulsion match the crime? And do you think that the university has basically taken a stance in which they are following an authoritarian system, sending a message to the rest of the students that if you oppose us, if you're an activist, that if you challenge oppression, suppression, injustice, you're going to be severely dealt with?
Definitely. I think the Wits University management certainly is sending out a message to students that they don't want anyone protesting on campus. They don't want anyone expressing their views around Palestine in particular. They don't want any students to show any support or solidarity with the Palestinian people. It certainly shows that the university is trying to suppress students and trying to align itself with quite heavily funded people, because certainly the university is trying to we believe the university is trying to suppress student activism on campus. They're working very hard in terms of trying to dispel or trying to prevent students from being active, from being politically active on campus, and the actions and the charges are indicative of that.
But now, student activism has a long history in South Africa, right? Both of you are involved in activism. I mean, you're a political science major student. The activism has led to a history of basically fighting against injustice, fighting against oppression, and it's a culture that needs to continue, because democracy doesn't necessarily mean freedom, nor does democracy necessarily mean justice. And in the case of the Palestinians, I mean, we know our former president Nelson Mandela said that South Africa will never be free until the Palestinians are free. My biggest concern is that the Vice-Chancellor, Adam Habib, was one of the main individuals who spearheaded this particular campaign. But when I looked at the entire chronology of events leading up to the charge, it is obvious that he was very much directed and instigated, or maybe even seconded by certain organizations, most specifically the Zionist lobby, to follow a particular pathway. And I mean, if you've seen the way in which he conducted the entire events, and the way the press statements were released, the manner in which decisions were taken before the students were even given a hearing or matters were properly evaluated, it raises serious questions about academic freedom and about the integrity of education in South Africa. What do students at Wits feel?
Well, I mean, it's obviously a huge problem on our campus around who's funding what, who's saying what, and the Wits PSC has been saying since the beginning of this whole process, since we got the charges, that clearly there has been funding pressures on the university. Clearly the Zionist lobby has been pressurizing our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Habib, and he actually went on record saying that yes, indeed, there was pressure from the Zionist lobby, and that there has been external pressure on the university. And we think this is obviously completely wrong. And it does an injustice not only to the principles of academic freedom, but to our entire university community. So we believe that the university has not upheld the principles of academic freedom in the way that it should be. And the interesting dynamic is that when we go back to the university and say, but you're hosting X, Y, or Z concert that's in violation of a global boycott, the university tells us, oh no, but we are allowed to hold those concerts and these events because of academic freedom. So it seems like the university wants to play a double standard on the principles of academic freedom. And that is fundamentally an issue in this whole process.
Yeah, Oyenda, while Tasneem was speaking about this, the protest, the boycott, etc., I mean, I know that South Africans, and we all know who've lived through the apartheid era, South Africans were heavily dependent on the support of the international community to bear down on the apartheid regime. And the Palestinians have globally called for us, the South Africans, and for the international community to follow the same kind of a stance and follow in the footprints of the anti-apartheid movement, the global movement that was taken by civil society. So if students who are the key to this entire game are now prevented from taking up the mantle, and if the university is claiming academic freedom on the one hand, as Tasneem says, and then on the other hand is supporting apartheid, because by supporting the Israeli pianist, you're actually supporting an apartheid state. How does one then reconcile between the two? And what does one do to take this matter forward?
Look, I think, firstly, students don't need to be despondent in this particular point in time. I think we need to realize and be completely aware of the fact that we wouldn't be where we are today if we didn't have that international support during the 90s and the 80s. I think it's quite important that students truly continue the fight. They become more involved in things like the Palestinian Solidarity Committee, BDS movement, and read up more information and understand exactly what the issue is.
So the key to the activism is to be informed and to continue with the movement, basically, and to take this, I mean, not to stop, I suppose. Hey,
Absolutely.
I have to take this to a break, and when we come back, I'd like to raise the further questions. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back to the second segment of Finding Me in the ITV networks. Today with me is Tasneem and Uyanda. Both are students from the WITS campus, both are activists, and both have been lobbying basically for the rights of the Palestinians who have been oppressed and occupied for over 60 years now. And before we went into the break, both Uyanda and Tasneem were explaining about the need to be positive, to carry the campaign forward, and to educate the people. But education is key to fighting injustice, to fighting oppression. But my question to you now, and I think, Uyanda, I'd like to start with you, is that if South African education is up for sale to the highest bidders, what we see happening now in many of the campuses, specifically WITS, because Adam Habib admitted that funding would be withdrawn if he didn't press charges against the student, and of course if this matter was not taken to the highest level, which resulted in a ridiculous sentence of expulsion of the 11 students for the charges, Tasneem, which you have mentioned. Is there any possibility of transformation in education in South Africa that teachers, students, information, or the means and the tools to equip themselves, which is and goes beyond that of white supremacy, beyond the values and norms of an education that has been brought to us by the colonial and the imperial agent? Is there an opportunity for students to engage in an education that promotes African identity, African positivity, and a unique sense of South Africanhood?
I think there is. I think the opportunity to learn and find out more goes beyond the classroom. I think there are many resources available. You can have a look at the BDS South Africa, look at BDS South Africa, have a look at other websites that speak about this particular issue. Look at the PACB website. There's a lot of information available out there. People need to equip themselves with this information and need to make a decision. They need to pick sides, because by keeping quiet about what's going on in Palestine, they're consenting. And so we are having, at WITS University, we do have many programs throughout the year which aim to educate and inform the WITS community at large about what's going on in Palestine. Mm-hmm. We have things like IAW, we have workshops that we run to educate students. We have various information available to students, which we make available to students for them to be able to be informed and to be able to make a decision.
So you think there is opportunity, of course, for a better education. But Tasneem, for the benefit of the viewers, what is IAW, what is BDS, and what is basically the agenda behind these two particular, if I may call them, centers that try to give information, IAW and BDS? And of course, how do you believe students can positively interact with these two particular centers and then make an informed decision?
Well, what I wanted to say to the question Uyanda was answering, that I think we can both attest that most of our learning has happened outside the classroom.
Okay.
And I think it's part of the way that the movement itself operates on campus. So Israeli Apartheid Week is coming up. It's an annual event. It started in Canada 10 years ago. So it's the 10th annual Israeli Apartheid Week. And it's really about highlighting the plight of the Palestinians through showing that Israel is an apartheid state, and how similar it is to apartheid South Africa, and to educate students, to educate workers, to educate staff, everyone around the issues of Israeli apartheid. And it lends itself well to the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, BDS, in that from there we can start to see what are the ways forward, and the only way forward that we know how to take is the ones that the Palestinians have suggested to us, and the answer that the Palestinians have called on us to give, which is to boycott Israel, boycott, divestment and sanctions against Israel. And that's the only way that we can see a way forward in the global community.
And the Palestinians have moved away from basically a violent movement towards a non-violent attempt at trying to raise the issues about the injustice and occupation in Palestine, and that's why BDS is so important, isn't it?
Well, I think, BDS is obviously a global non-violent movement. And, us sitting in South Africa or the UK or wherever, we're not directly touched by what is happening in Israel-Palestine. But we can see the injustice. And because we see that injustice, we have to do something about that. And non-violent means is what is at our disposal. The other thing is that the boycott movement takes from the South African boycott movement, the international movement against apartheid South Africa. So the world knows about this type of movement. We as South Africans owe our freedom to this type of movement. So we need to lend ourselves into that movement and grow the boycott. And that's why the protest last year at WITS was so important, because it was around the issue of boycotting Israel.
And Oyanda, specifically the reason that the SRC took a decision to boycott Israel at WITS?
Well, obviously, I think Taz has covered it a lot in her response there. We looked at a lot of various issues. We knew about the international call, which was made by the Palestinian people in 2005, and the resolutions in organizations like SASCO and the ANC lend themselves to the BDS movement, and we as an SRC were in a position to actually, introspect and see which side of history we want to lie on. And obviously we wanted to be on the correct side of history. We wanted to show our support, the same support which South Africa received during apartheid. So that's basically amongst the many reasons that we took the resolution.
But if somebody who is watching this that said that the SRC is a student representative committee, they took a decision to boycott all cultural activities sponsored by the State of Israel on the WITS campus. Somebody can say, okay, but the student body has taken this. Does it necessarily reflect the attitude or mentality of the management? And does management have a responsibility to respect the decision of the Student Representative Council?
Well, I think the fact that the Higher Education Act requires an SRC to be formed and to be respected within a university clearly means that the decisions that are taken by that SRC should be respected by the university management and should represent the views of their students. And obviously, at the time when we took the resolution, the PYA-led SRC was in full majority, so students had voted us in and entrusted us to take decisions which would obviously benefit them and which would reflect their views and their interests.
But if you consider this particular scenario now, we find that there is a new movement on the WITS campus. You were telling me about the new group that lobbied recently for the SRC elections, and perhaps, Tasneem, you'd like to elaborate about them. And of course, the concern that even student bodies are now being funded by the Zionist lobby in order to forward or to propagate the Israeli agenda on campus.
Well, I mean, it's becoming a well-known fact. The Zionist lobby is infiltrating all sections of our university, from management level with funding to a student level in terms of SRCs and what's going on in the student body. But I mean, the Zionist lobby has become very powerful on our campuses, and it's become powerful because management has allowed them to become so powerful. And now their inroads into the student population are there too. There's obviously always been Zionist groupings of students on campus that organize counter acts to Israeli Apartheid Week and so on. So this year we have Israeli Awareness Week happening during our Israeli Apartheid Week to raise awareness around how great a democracy Israel is. So this has always happened. And we try to find ways to show the student population what is really happening.
Okay, so there definitely is a disjuncture between what the students feel and what management is doing. We have to go to a break. When we come back, I would like to just take this conversation a little bit further, but we'll see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the final segment of Finding Me in the ITV networks. With me today is Tasneem and Uyanda, both student activists at the University of Witwatersrand. And before we went into the break, Tasneem, both you and Uyanda were explaining to us about the challenges that students face, especially those who want to raise the issues. This year, of course, as you explained, there's now Israeli Awareness Week in conjunction with Israeli Apartheid Week. I mean, for me, that is simply a huge joke because, I mean, everybody who knows a little bit about anything will know that Israel is not really a democracy, but an ethnocracy that propagates and promotes the ethnic identity of the Jews, and so there is no equality of citizens. And that is key to rule of law, that everybody is equal before the law. Now, Tasneem, you were part of the 11 that has been suspended, yet you are pursuing your master's. What are the consequences of that?
Well, I think, from the start of this process, from the day after the protest, it's been difficult on the 11 of us academically. We've had to sit in a hearing for an entire year. It dragged for several months, and we had to sit in that hearing every day and listen to what people had to say. And now the consequences are that those of us who are staying at WITS really have to be on our best behavior all the time. We know that if we're found guilty or found of doing anything that WITS considers misconduct, then we'll be immediately excluded from the university for a year. So it is harsh, and it does put us in a very precarious situation. There are things that students do every day that we'll now not be allowed to do because of these charges.
So basically, Oyanda, what the university is saying, that you can come and study here as long as you're a lapdog. Quiet, come in, go to your lectures, don't ask questions, don't raise questions, just do what has to be done and get out.
Absolutely. I think the university management certainly is sending out a strong message around protest and around students being active on campus. They're trying to suppress student leaders, in particular those that lead in the SRC and in other governance structures on campus. They want to have them as you were correctly saying, as lapdogs, as people who walk in and walk out of campus, who have no other interest on campus or who can't be active or do anything on campus, which would lead them to being expelled. So, yeah, it's quite a difficult situation.
It actually raises the entire discussion of what Jonathan Jansen said. There's a difference between teaching and education. So basically what they're saying is, we're teaching you, come in, take what we're offering you, but you're not allowed to get an education, because an education involves interaction, discussion, debate, opening of the mind. I want to come very quickly because I need to get parting thoughts from you guys on a statement that Desmond Tutu said, where he said the issue of a principled commitment to justice lies at the heart of responses to the suffering of the Palestinian people, and it is the absence of such a commitment that enables many to turn a blind eye to it. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. And I know that the WITS management said we need to be neutral, we need to promote both sides, etc. And many individuals, even political parties, very often I've heard DA say we need to be neutral. I've also heard a Hang not develop a fear of foreign policy about the Israel-Palestinian question, and also about maintaining neutrality. What is your parting comment on this?
Well, I actually feel that, this type of comment is, we hear it frequently, but it's actually a complete cop-out. It gives us absolutely no political view from any of these political parties or from universities. And it's exactly the type of view that we should be against. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be neutral in certain situations. And WITS, is one of those universities that uses this type of rhetoric to its advantage. It's absolutely false. When the WITS management wanted to take a position on the Dalai Lama, for instance, being denied a visa, it did so,
yes.
But now when it's an Israel-Palestine issue, it's a problem. When it's a fees issue, it's a problem. So it's about what issues, it's selective thinking on the university's part. It's the issues they want to take up and the issues they don't want to take up.
Sorry, Oyanda, would you like to add to that very quickly?
Taz has covered it quite well there. Tasneem has covered it quite well there. But certainly the university is certainly, sending out a very confusing message to students. On one hand, they would like, protest and so forth to take place, but when it's under their control or when it's under their terms and conditions.
Or it's an issue that they particularly want to promote.
Yes.
And it works for their image.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's all about image, and we have to go to a short video clip. Rafif Ziada speaks about the Palestinian situation. She raises the soundbite about how the Palestinian situation has effectively been controlled by the media. And when we come back, I'd like to close on that. But for now, we'd like to play the video clip for you.
Today, my body was a TV'd massacre. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre that had to fit into sound bites and word limits. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre that had to fit into sound bites and word limits, filled enough with statistics to counter measured response. And I perfected my English and I learned my UN resolutions. But still, he asked me, Ms. Ziada, don't you think everything would be resolved if you would just stop teaching so much hatred to your children? Pause. I look inside of me for strength to be patient, but patience is not at the tip of my tongue as the bombs drop over Gaza. Patience has just escaped me. Pause. Smile. We teach life, sir. Rafif, remember to smile. Pause. we teach life, sir. We Palestinians teach life after they have occupied the last sky. We teach life after they have built their settlements and apartheid walls. After the last skies, we teach life, sir. But today, my body was a TV'd massacre made to fit into sound bites and word limits. And just give us a story, a human story. You see, this is not political. We just want to tell people about you and your people. So give us a human story. Don't mention that word apartheid and occupation. This is not political. You have to help me as a journalist to help you tell your story, which is not a political story. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre. How about you give us a story of a woman in Gaza who needs medication? How about you? Do you have enough bone-broken limbs to cover the sun? Hand me over your dead and give me the list of their names in 1,200 word limits. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre made to fit into sound bites and word limits and move those that are desensitized to terrorist blood. But they felt sorry. They felt sorry for the cattle over Gaza. So I give them UN resolutions and statistics, and we condemn and we deplore and we reject. And these are not two equal sides, occupier and occupied, and 100 dead, 200 dead, and 1,000 dead. And between that war crime and massacre, I vent out words and smile, not exotic. Smile, not terrorist. And I recount 100 dead, 200 dead, 1,000 dead. Is anyone out there? Will anyone listen? I wish I could wail over their bodies. I wish I could just run barefoot in every refugee camp and hold every child, cover their ears so they wouldn't have to hear the sound of bombing for the rest of their life the way I do. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre, and let me just tell you, there is nothing your UN resolutions have ever done about this. And no soundbite I come up with, no matter how good my English gets, no soundbite will bring them back to life. No soundbite will fix this. We teach life, sir. We teach life, sir. We Palestinians wake up every morning to teach the rest of the world life, sir.
As Rafiq Ziad has said, we teach life, sir. And the fight of the Palestinians is a fight for life. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much to you, Tasneem and Oyanda, for being here, for sharing your viewpoints, and of course, making the audience aware of the bravery that is involved in bringing forth activism and the issues that are related to activism. And I hope that inspires many more South African youth to raise the flag for the Palestinian struggle, a struggle against occupation, injustice, and human rights violations.